At 87, in the final chapter of his long life, Len Dawson finally opened the door to the truths he had kept guarded for decades. To the world, he was the calm field general who never panicked, the quarterback who brought Kansas City its first championship, and the familiar voice who later explained the game with steady grace. But behind that controlled presence lived a history far more complicated than any fan ever imagined. Dawson carried memories shaped by doubt, quiet betrayal, and moments that nearly erased his career before greatness ever arrived. He understood how people saw him: a model of composure, a precision passer, a man untouched by chaos. But according to those who knew him best, his calm was not a gift. It was a shield forged across years of struggling to survive in a league that once seemed determined to push him out. He faced coaches who misread him, rivals who overshadowed him, injuries that threatened to break him, and pressures that followed him into every huddle. As age softened his voice, he began to speak honestly about the parts of his journey the public never saw. 5 moments in particular stayed with him, 5 turning points that shaped not only his career, but his sense of who he was. These truths revealed the storms behind the calm, the battles behind the elegance, and the resolve beneath the quiet leadership that defined him. Tonight, we uncover those 5 hidden truths, the ones Len Dawson carried until the very end. Long before the cameras framed him as a symbol of composure, Leonard Ray Dawson was a quarterback searching for a place where his talent could breathe. Born in Ohio, raised in an era defined by discipline and quiet resolve, he grew up with a sense of purpose that never needed to be spoken. People often described him as calm, but his calm came from something deeper. It came from years of fighting to prove that he belonged in a league that rarely offered second chances. When he entered professional football, he carried the expectations of being a first-round pick. Pittsburgh saw promise in his arm, but the system around him never matched the skills he possessed. Coaches wanted a style that did not fit the player he was becoming. Instead of growing, he sat, watched, and waited. In those early seasons, he learned something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Talent alone did not shape a career. Opportunity was everything, and opportunity could be taken away without warning. His second stop in Cleveland offered little relief. The roster was crowded, the vision unclear, and Dawson continued to feel like a man trapped in the wrong story. Yet, he refused to break. Even as the league labeled him a disappointment, he kept studying, kept preparing, kept believing that one day he would land in a place where a quarterback with surgical accuracy and unshakable presence could rise. That place arrived when he reunited with Hank Stram in Kansas City. Stram understood him in a way no coach ever had. He saw the timing, the footwork, and the intelligence that others had dismissed. Under Stram, Dawson found the space he had been denied for nearly a decade. The Chiefs system allowed him to orchestrate an offense with clarity and purpose. Every throw had intention. Every decision reflected the calm leadership that would later become his trademark. The AFL became the stage that allowed him to transform. He led with quiet authority, earning respect, not through volume, but through precision and poise. His teammates trusted him because he never panicked. His opponents feared him because he rarely made mistakes. As his reputation grew, so did the weight of expectations. Super Bowl success, national attention, and the beginnings of a broadcasting legacy followed. Yet beneath the steady climb lived a more complicated truth. Dawson's journey had been shaped by doubt, by people who underestimated him, and by moments that forced him to confront who he truly was. His greatness did not come from ease. It came from survival. The 5 hidden truths that defined him were born during these years of struggle, growth, and quiet transformation. They reveal a man who endured far more than fans ever saw. They reveal a legend forged not by praise, but by adversity. Long before Len Dawson became the face of Kansas City, his path collided with a coach whose decisions left a lasting mark on him. This was a man with a reputation for rigid systems and uncompromising demands. In Pittsburgh, he held the authority to shape careers, and he believed in structure over creativity. To him, a quarterback was a cog in a machine, not an artist. Dawson entered this environment as a young player full of promise, unaware that his future would be shaped by choices that had little to do with his talent. The friction began almost immediately. The coach viewed Dawson as a developmental project rather than the polished passer he had shown himself to be at Purdue. Instead of designing plays that used Dawson's quick release and timing, the system forced him into roles that never fit his strengths. Practices became tests of patience. Meetings became reminders that the organization had little intention of building around him. The young quarterback felt the walls closing in, yet he stayed respectful and silent, believing he could eventually win the coach's trust. That trust never came. The turning point unfolded during a game week when Dawson had performed well in practice, delivering accurate throws and commanding the offense with control. The team needed a spark, but the coach refused to consider him. He named another quarterback the starter even though the offense had stalled for weeks. It was not a decision based on performance. It was a reflection of the coach's belief that Dawson simply did not fit the mold he valued. Players in the locker room noticed the tension. Some felt the team owed Dawson a chance. Others feared challenging the hierarchy. Dawson stood alone, understanding that decisions in football were not always about fairness. The defining moment arrived later that season. During a brief appearance on the field, he showed flashes of the precision that would one day define him. He read the coverage, moved calmly in the pocket, and delivered a strike that cut through the defense. For a moment, the stadium felt the spark of what he could become. The crowd reacted, teammates responded, and the offense looked alive. Yet, instead of rewarding the moment, the coach pulled him from the game. He did not explain the decision. He simply closed the door. Dawson sat on the sideline with the quiet realization that his future in Pittsburgh was no longer in his hands. In that silence, he learned one of the first hidden truths that would shape his career. Football was a world where talent could be buried by the wrong leadership. He understood that a coach could determine a man's destiny before he ever had the chance to prove himself. The cold truth was simple. That coach never believed in him, and Dawson never forgot how quickly a promising career could be pushed aside. The grudge did not turn into hatred, but it settled deep within him as a reminder. When he later became a leader of champions, he carried lesson number 5. Never underestimate the power of belief. A quarterback cannot rise without it, and a team will never reach greatness when its leaders fail to recognize the talent in front of them. Before Len Dawson became a symbol of composure, he spent years wrestling with the presence of a rival quarterback who always seemed to stand in his way. This was not a bitter feud filled with insults. It was something heavier. A quiet rivalry built on opportunity perception and the unspoken truth that in professional football, only one man can lead the huddle. Their careers intersected at crucial moments, and Dawson learned early that even the calmest competitors can feel the sting of being overshadowed. The other quarterback carried a reputation for physical toughness and traditional style. Coaches admired his grit. Teammates respected his longevity. He fit the league's image of what a quarterback should look like. Dawson was different. He relied on timing intelligence and a surgical precision that required a system built around his strengths. When the two were placed side by side, decision-makers often chose the safer image over the sharper talent. Dawson felt the weight of those choices long before the public recognized his potential. The tension reached a breaking point during a pivotal season when the team needed direction. Dawson had displayed accuracy throughout preseason and had shown progress in mastering the offense. Many expected him to start. Instead, the coaching staff turned once again to the rival. The decision surprised the locker room. Some players believed Dawson gave them a better chance to win. Others feared the disruption that could come from challenging a veteran. Dawson watched from the sideline as the offense struggled, knowing he could execute the plays that were failing on the field. The defining moment came during a mid-season game when the rival quarterback suffered an injury. Dawson entered under pressure, facing a defense known for its relentless aggression. With little preparation and almost no support from the coaching staff, he stepped into the huddle with the calm that would later define him. On his first drive, he hit 3 consecutive throws, each delivered with poise and anticipation. The momentum shifted. The offense came alive, and for a brief stretch, the team looked transformed. Yet after the game, the coach refused to acknowledge what everyone had seen. Even with Dawson's strong performance, the staff reaffirmed their commitment to the veteran once he recovered. That choice cut deeper than any physical hit. It was a public reminder that belief was a currency he did not possess. The rival returned to the starting role, and Dawson returned to the bench, understanding that his path to the field would not come through fairness. It would come through survival. The cold truth emerged slowly. He realized that this rival did not hate him. In fact, Dawson respected the man's toughness and longevity. The real conflict was with the system that valued image over efficiency. Still, the presence of that rival forced him to confront doubts he never voiced. Was he truly capable of leading a team, or was he destined to remain an understudy to someone who fit the league's expectations more naturally? Years later, when Dawson rose to greatness in Kansas City, he carried lesson number 4. Rivalries are not always born from anger. Sometimes they are born from the quiet pain of being overlooked. That rival quarterback never meant harm, but his shadow shaped Dawson's resolve. The grudge lived in memory, not in bitterness, reminding him that proving himself would always require more than talent. Long before Len Dawson lifted a championship trophy, he faced an executive whose decisions nearly pushed him out of professional football entirely. This executive held power over rosters, contracts, and careers. He believed in traditional evaluations and rigid categories. To him, Dawson was an unfulfilled draft pick, a talent that had failed to bloom quickly enough. In meetings and internal discussions, the executive made it clear that he viewed Dawson as expendable. It was a judgment that would follow Dawson across 2 organizations and would eventually force him to rebuild his career from the ground up. The conflict began during Dawson's early years when the executive pushed for a quarterback room built around players who fit a narrow mold. Dawson, with his calm presence and cerebral playing style, did not match the prototype. Reports from that period describe a decision-maker who valued size and arm strength more than accuracy, timing, and leadership. Dawson felt the chill long before the team made any official announcement. He sensed that no matter how well he prepared, the organization had already decided who he was. The breaking point arrived when the executive initiated internal discussions about moving on from him long before Dawson had been given any consistent opportunity to start. Coaches who saw flashes of his brilliance in practice had little influence. Their support meant little against the executive's belief that Dawson would never become a franchise quarterback. The front office began exploring trades and releases. Rumors reached the locker room. Teammates approached Dawson quietly, telling him to stay ready. But the message behind their words was clear. His future was hanging by a thread. The defining moment came when the organization officially released him. The decision was not based on performance. It was based on perception created by a man who had already made up his mind. Dawson walked out of the facility carrying the weight of uncertainty. For the first time in his life, he was unemployed, a quarterback without a home, a player who had spent years preparing for a stage that seemed determined to shut its doors. That moment changed him. It forced him to confront a truth that would shape the rest of his career. Success in football was fragile, and sometimes the people in charge could alter a man's path without ever seeing his true capabilities. When Dawson joined Cleveland, he hoped for a fresh start, but the executive's label followed him, influencing how other organizations viewed him. The stigma of being a cast-off became part of his identity. He worked harder, studied more intensely, and carried himself with quiet discipline, determined that no executive would ever define him again. The cold truth settled in during those years. He realized that his career had nearly ended because one man lacked vision. That executive never saw the leader Dawson would become in Kansas City. He never saw the championship poise the surgical passing or the broadcast legacy that would follow. To Dawson, the sting was not personal hatred. It was the knowledge that an uninformed judgment had almost erased a future that would become historic. When he later hoisted the Lombardi Trophy, Dawson carried lesson number 3. Never allow someone else's limited view to limit your belief in yourself. He knew how close he had come to disappearing from the league. He knew how easily a man's potential could be dismissed. The grudge lived as a reminder that greatness sometimes survives only by slipping past the gatekeepers who never recognized it. Of all the forces that shaped Len Dawson, few left a deeper imprint than the injury that nearly erased his career before it ever reached its peak. Unlike the rivals or executives who stood in his path, this opponent had no face, no voice, and no intention. It arrived without warning and threatened everything he had worked for. Dawson had survived doubt dismissal and the harsh judgments of early coaches, but when the injury struck, he realized that even the strongest resolve could not protect him from the fragility of the human body. The conflict began during a season when Dawson felt he was finally gaining traction. His timing was sharp, his confidence growing, and his understanding of the offense deeper than ever. But on a single play, the momentum evaporated. He took a hit that twisted his body at an unnatural angle. Pain shot through him, immediate and unforgiving. Trainers rushed to the field. Teammates knelt in silence. He had endured physical punishment before, but this pain was different. It was the kind that whispered danger. As doctors examined him, uncertainty filled the room. The diagnosis carried words no athlete wants to hear: significant damage, long recovery, risk of re-injury. The team could not guarantee when or even if he would return to full strength. For the first time, Dawson felt a fear deeper than the fear of failing in football. He felt the fear of losing the game entirely. Football had been the structure of his life since childhood. Without it, he faced an empty space he did not know how to fill. The defining moment came during rehab when progress stalled. Weeks of careful work suddenly hit a wall. His body resisted the movements that once came naturally. He began questioning everything. Would his footwork ever return? Would his release still be as quick? Would any team trust a quarterback who had already been discarded once and now carried the label of being physically unreliable? The injury became more than a physical battle. It became a psychological duel that tested his patience and identity. One afternoon, during a slow training session, Dawson attempted a simple drop back. His leg wobbled and he felt a surge of pain that forced him to stop. He stood quietly surrounded by empty bleachers, listening to the wind move through the stadium. That moment cut deeper than any hit he had ever taken. It symbolized the possibility that his career might end, not with failure, but with absence. No comeback, no redemption. Just a quiet disappearance from the game he loved. But Dawson refused to let the injury define him. He approached rehab with renewed discipline, focusing on precision and subtle improvements. Inch by inch, he rebuilt himself. When he finally returned to the field, he carried not just physical recovery, but a sharpened understanding of his mortality. Every throw, every step, and every decision felt heavier, more deliberate. The cold truth of this chapter became clear. The injury had not only threatened his career, it had forced him to grow. It taught him that leadership was not just about poise in the huddle. It was about resilience when no one was watching. The injury nearly stole his future, but it also revealed the strength that allowed him to become the quarterback Kansas City trusted. When Dawson ultimately rose toward greatness, he carried lesson number 2. Even the calmest legends are shaped by moments of fear, and survival is sometimes the strongest foundation of all. There was one force that haunted Len Dawson more than any coach, rival, or executive. It was not a person. It was the pressure that lived with him from the moment he first stepped into a professional huddle. This pressure did not shout, threaten, or criticize. It whispered. It whispered during quiet nights, during long flights, during the moments when the stadium fell silent and every eye looked at him for answers. It followed him through Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Kansas City, shaping him in ways no one ever saw. It became the defining weight of his career and the deepest truth he carried. The pressure began early. As a first-round pick, he felt the burden of expectations long before he touched the field. Each practice rep carried judgment. Each game snap carried comparison. Fans and media wanted him to be the savior of a franchise still searching for identity. Instead, he became a player, waiting for a chance that rarely came. The pressure grew heavier with each season on the sideline. It told him he was falling behind. It told him the window was closing. It told him that time, not talent, was his real enemy. When he arrived in Kansas City, the pressure did not fade. It changed shape. Under Hank Stram, he finally found a coach who believed in him, but belief brought its own demands. Now the pressure whispered a different message. You cannot waste this opportunity. You cannot fail the coach who trusted you. You cannot make a mistake that confirms what others once said about you. Every throw carried layers of meaning, reaching far beyond the scoreboard. The defining moment of this pressure came during the run to the championship. Kansas City was not just competing. They were representing an entire league, fighting for respect. Dawson was the face of that fight. During one crucial playoff week, he battled pain fatigue and relentless scrutiny. Reporters questioned his durability. Analysts questioned his ability to win on the biggest stage. The pressure pressed against him like a living force. The Chiefs needed him calm. The league needed him precise. History demanded he deliver. At one point in practice, he missed a throw he normally completed with ease. The ball sailed high. His receivers stopped and looked back. For a rare second, Dawson felt the fear that had chased him since Pittsburgh. Was he enough? Could he elevate himself under the brightest lights? He walked back to the huddle, adjusted his helmet, and breathed slowly. In that breath, he confronted the truth he had always carried. Pressure does not disappear. It must be mastered. When the championship game arrived, Dawson delivered the performance that defined his legacy. He read the field with sharp clarity. He placed the ball where only his receivers could catch it. He moved with a calm that felt supernatural. Viewers saw a man untouched by nerves, but only he understood the truth. The pressure was still there, pressing on his shoulders, waiting for a crack. He simply refused to let it break him. The cold truth of Dawson's greatest burden became clear later in life. His battles were never just with coaches or rivals. His greatest opponent was the quiet internal voice that demanded perfection. He spent decades learning to silence it, not through bravado, but through discipline, patience, and unwavering control. When history remembers Len Dawson, it remembers the calm. But the hidden truth behind that calm was a lifetime of wrestling with pressure powerful enough to shape legends. Amid the defining conflicts of Len Dawson's career, there was one figure whose impact rarely appeared in headlines. He was a teammate, known for disciplined, sharp instincts and a quiet edge that made him one of the most respected players in the locker room. Unlike rivals or executives, this teammate never opposed Dawson publicly. Their conflict lived in the subtle spaces of shared leadership, unspoken expectations, and the delicate balance of guiding a team with two strong minds at the center. The tension began during a season when the Chiefs struggled to find rhythm. Dawson commanded the offense. His teammate commanded the heart of the defense. Both were leaders, but their approaches could not have been more different. Dawson relied on calm instruction and measured control. His teammate relied on intensity. When the team fell behind in games, teammates often turned to the defensive leader for fire while looking to Dawson for steadiness. The dual leadership created a quiet divide, not of disrespect, but of influence. The defining moment came during a heated halftime meeting following a disastrous first half. The defensive leader openly challenged the team's commitment, staring directly at Dawson as he spoke about accountability. It was not an attack, but a test. Dawson met the stare without blinking. A few words exchanged privately afterward revealed a truth both men understood. Leadership demanded alignment, not conflict. In time, they found balance, and the Chiefs became stronger for it. Yet Dawson never forgot how close they came to fracturing. The cold truth was clear. Even among allies, tension can shape a man's path. That teammate reminded him that leadership is not given. It is earned in silence as much as in victory. By the time Len Dawson reached the peak of his career, the pieces of his long and complicated journey had begun to align. What looked like calm and effortless command on the field was the outcome of years spent navigating doubt, rejection, and the quiet weight of expectation. His transformation was not sudden. It was built through the very trials that threatened to break him. Each hidden truth that shaped his path became a part of the foundation that carried him into football history. When Kansas City surged toward its championship moment, Dawson stood at the center of a team carrying the hopes of an entire league. The AFL fought for respect against a larger and more established rival. Critics questioned the level of competition, the quality of play, and the possibility that an AFL team could ever stand equal with the giants of the sport. Dawson shouldered the responsibility of answering those doubts. He had become the steady presence that players trusted, the quiet voice that brought order to tense huddles, and the quarterback who understood how to control a game with intelligence rather than chaos. The pressure mounted as the season unfolded. Every victory added weight. Every challenge revealed another layer of his composure. Yet beneath that composure lived a man shaped by the conflicts that defined his earlier years. The coach who dismissed him taught him resilience. The rival quarterback who overshadowed him taught him patience. The executive who cut him taught him self-belief. The injury that nearly ended his career taught him to value every moment on the field. The teammate whose fire contrasted with his calm taught him how to unify competing forms of leadership. These lessons converged as Dawson prepared for the greatest stage of his life. During the championship run, Dawson displayed something more than skill. He displayed a mastery of timing awareness and emotional control that separated him from the quarterbacks who relied solely on physical power. He read defenses with clarity formed through years of studying from the sidelines. He anticipated pressure because he had lived with pressure long before the stadium lights exposed it. Every audible, every throw, and every decision reflected the journey that had shaped him. Kansas City saw a quarterback operating with deeper understanding. Opponents saw a man who simply refused to panic. The turning point arrived in the final game when Dawson delivered a performance that carried the weight of a league. The world saw confidence. They saw stability. They saw a poised quarterback who commanded the field with effortless rhythm. But Dawson knew what lay beneath each moment. He knew the years of being doubted. He knew the fear of injury and the quiet moments when he questioned whether his career would ever become what he once imagined. The game became more than a battle for a title. It became a chance to rewrite everything that had once tried to diminish him. When the clock expired and Kansas City stood as champions, Dawson felt a surge of validation that reached far beyond celebration. He had arrived at the summit not as a natural star but as a survivor who had rebuilt himself piece by piece. His legacy was not defined only by victories or statistics. It was defined by endurance. It was defined by his ability to navigate adversity without losing his sense of identity. It was defined by the truth that greatness often belongs to the man who stays standing after everything else has tried to push him down. As his career progressed and he moved into broadcasting, Dawson carried the lessons of his journey into a new arena. His calm voice became a companion for millions of fans, a reminder that football is shaped by forces the public never sees. His commentary reflected the same qualities that made him a leader on the field: precision, intelligence, steady presence. When he spoke about the challenges faced by quarterbacks, he spoke with the authority of someone who had lived through the sharpest edges of the profession. When Dawson passed away in 2022 at the age of 87, he left behind a legacy far larger than a championship. He left behind a story of perseverance. He left behind a blueprint for surviving the unforgiving nature of professional sports. His life revealed a truth that resonated far beyond the field. Champions are not formed by easy paths. They are forged in struggle, in doubt, and in the quiet battles that never make the highlight reels. Len Dawson's legend lives because he turned adversity into strength. He transformed silence into leadership, and he carried 5 hidden truths that defined him as both a player and a man.